The package was already on her desk when Claire arrived. No delivery confirmation, no security log, no explanation. It simply sat there between her keyboard and her cold coffee cup, pristine and unmarked, as if it had materialized from the rain that hammered against the 42nd floor windows of Ashford and Associates. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a photograph. Her. Walking into her favorite coffee shop on Madison Avenue, her scarf trailing behind her like a whisper. Beneath it, another photo, her entering her apartment building, rain-soaked and vulnerable. Another. Her having lunch with her sister last Saturday, laughing at something she couldn't remember anymore. The most recent photograph was from yesterday. Claire's hands shook as she pulled out the final image, herself leaving the office at 6:47 p.m., her coat collar turned up against the wind, her face perfectly visible to whoever had been watching. Every detail was sharp, professional, terrifying. And then the card. We need to talk. Tonight. 9 p.m. The Meridian Hotel, Suite 4015. Come alone. Tell no one. Oh, God, she whispered to the empty office. 3 years as a senior financial consultant at one of Manhattan's most prestigious firms, and Claire Hayes had built her reputation on being meticulous, trustworthy, invisible. She processed numbers. She disappeared into spreadsheets. She was the person your company hired when you needed someone who asked the right questions and then forgot them. She'd made a mistake. The Russo account had seemed simple enough when it crossed her desk 2 weeks ago. A real estate portfolio, high-volume acquisitions and liquidations, substantial profits. But something about it had nagged at her, that itch in her brain that came when numbers didn't quite sing the right song. So she dug deeper. Shell corporations layered like sediment, each one obscuring the last. Properties purchased through intermediaries, moved through a labyrinth of LLCs, then sold within months at suspicious profits. The paperwork was immaculate, almost suspiciously so. Too perfect, too clean. The kind of clean that made her think of someone trying very hard to hide something. By midnight, she'd compiled a comprehensive report. By 1 a.m, she'd sent it to her boss with a recommendation to flag the account for further investigation. By 3 a.m., her phone had rung. Ms. Hayes? The voice had been smooth, controlled, with an accent she couldn't place. European, maybe. Or something else entirely. This is regarding your report on the Russo account. She remembered sitting up in bed, suddenly aware of how alone she was in her apartment, how easily someone could find her there. Who is this? She'd asked. Someone interested in your thoroughness, the voice had continued, unbothered by her question. Your attention to detail, it's admirable, rare, even. If there's a legitimate explanation for the discrepancies. There isn't one, the voice interrupted gently, as if explaining something simple to a child. But that's not why I'm calling. I'm calling because you've stumbled onto something that requires discretion, the kind of discretion that comes with a price. The line had gone dead. And now this. The photographs, the message, the undeniable proof that someone had been watching her, cataloging her movements, demonstrating their reach with the precision of a surgeon's knife. Claire shoved everything back into the package with trembling fingers and locked it in her desk drawer. She tried to work, but the numbers blurred on her screen. She couldn't focus. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow crossing her vision felt like a threat. The office suddenly felt too exposed, too public, too vulnerable. By 8:30 p.m., she'd made her decision. She didn't call the police. That was the rational choice, and rationality had abandoned her somewhere between the second photograph and the card. Instead, she went home, changed clothes 3 times, and ultimately chose dark jeans and a cream-colored blouse. Something unremarkable, invisible. She left her phone behind, reasoning that a phone could be traced, that technology was a liability. The logic of that decision seemed increasingly questionable the closer she got to the Meridian Hotel. The lobby was all marble and soft lighting, the kind of elegance that whispered money without shouting it. Claire kept her head down as she crossed to the elevators, hyper-aware of every camera, every security guard, every eye that might be watching. The 4th-floor hallway was silent and impossibly long. Her footsteps echoed despite her careful steps. Suite 4015 waited at the end like a predator at rest. She knocked. The door opened immediately, as if someone had been waiting on the other side, hand already on the knob. The man in the doorway was not what she'd expected. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark eyes that seemed to catalog everything about her in a single glance. His charcoal suit fit him perfectly, custom-tailored, expensive. But it was something else that made her breath catch, an invisible weight that seemed to radiate from him, like gravity itself bent slightly in his direction. "Ms. Hayes," he said, and she recognized the voice immediately. 3 a.m. The phone call. This was him. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." The suite was enormous, a corner room with views of the city stretching in 3 directions. Rain streaked the windows, transforming the lights of Manhattan into something dreamlike and unreal. "Who are you?" Claire asked, refusing the implicit invitation to sit. "My name is Vincent Russo," he said simply. He moved toward the window with fluid grace, putting distance between them. It was a calculated gesture, backing away to seem less threatening. She appreciated the manipulation for what it was. "And I believe you've been looking at my finances." The world tilted on its axis. Russo, the account, the shell corporations, the impossible profits. This beautiful, dangerous man was the architect of everything she'd uncovered. "I was doing my job," Claire said carefully. "That's all." "Exactly," Vincent replied, turning to face her. His expression was unreadable, his eyes reflecting the city lights. "You were doing your job exceptionally well. Most people would have seen the numbers and accepted them. Most people lack the courage to question what's in front of them. But you're not most people, are you, Claire?" She didn't correct him for using her first name. "I have a proposition," he continued, moving closer. His movements were controlled, predatory in a way that wasn't quite threatening. Not yet. "I need someone I can trust. Someone intelligent enough to understand what they're looking at. Someone discreet enough to keep their mouth shut. Someone who understands that there are consequences for talking." "The photographs," she said quietly. "Yes, the photographs." He stopped just close enough that she could see the exact shade of his eyes, dark brown, almost black in the dim light. "They were a courtesy, a reminder that I know everything about you, Claire. Where you live, where you work, where your sister lives, where your mother has her therapy appointments on Thursdays." Claire's blood turned to ice. "I bring this up not as a threat," Vincent continued, his voice remaining conversational, "but as context. You're no longer invisible, Ms. Hayes. You're no longer just another consultant disappearing into spreadsheets. You've made yourself visible to me. And now," he reached out, his fingers coming close enough to brush a strand of hair from her face without actually touching her. "Now, you're mine to protect." Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city clean of everything except secrets. The apartment was on the Upper West Side, in a building so exclusive it didn't have a name, just a discreet brass number on a wrought iron gate. Vincent had walked her there personally, his hand never touching her back, but his presence heavy enough that she felt it anyway. "This is yours now," he'd said, producing a key card from his suit jacket. "For as long as you work for me." That had been 3 days ago. Claire stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows now, watching the city wake up beneath a pale gray sky. The apartment was beautiful, in that sterile way expensive things often were, all marble and chrome and carefully curated art that probably cost more than her annual salary. There was fresh fruit in the refrigerator, her favorite coffee in the pantry, clothes in her size hanging in the walk-in closet. He'd thought of everything. Or rather, he'd had someone think of everything. The precision of it was somehow more terrifying than any explicit threat could have been. Her phone, a new one provided by Vincent, buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text from an unknown number: "Wear the navy dress. Car arrives at 7 p.m. Claire had stopped questioning the directives 3 days ago. Resistance only prolonged the conversations, and his conversations had a way of circling back to what he knew about her: her sister's apartment on the Upper East Side, her mother's medication schedule, her father's fishing cabin in Vermont, where she'd learned to tie her first knot at age 7. The navy dress fit perfectly. Everything he provided fit perfectly. She'd started to wonder if he'd had someone break into her apartment and measure her clothes while she was at the office. The thought should have horrified her. Instead, it had just made her feel smaller. The car was a black Mercedes with tinted windows. The driver didn't speak during the 20-minute drive through Manhattan. Claire sat in the back seat and tried not to think about what happened to people who disappeared into cars with tinted windows. They stopped at a restaurant she'd never heard of. No sign. No indication that anything existed behind the unmarked door. The driver simply nodded at a man in an expensive suit standing in the shadows, and the man ushered her inside. Vincent was waiting at a corner table. He wore a navy suit that matched her dress. Whether by accident or design, she couldn't tell. Probably design. Nothing about Vincent seemed accidental. "You came," he said, as if she'd had a choice. "I was told to," Claire replied, sitting across from him. "And yet, you could have called the police, gone to the FBI, told them about the photographs, the apartment, the surveillance." He studied her face like she was a particularly interesting equation. "Why didn't you?" Claire didn't answer immediately. The truth was complicated. The truth was that part of her, some dark, twisted part that she didn't want to acknowledge, was curious. This man had moved through her life like a ghost, knew her routines better than she did, and yet there was something almost intimate about the attention, something seductive about being known this completely. "Because you'd reach them before I finished dialing," she finally said. "Perhaps," Vincent conceded. A waiter appeared and disappeared, leaving plates of food neither of them had ordered. "Or perhaps because you're intelligent enough to understand that your cooperation is the only thing keeping your family safe." "Your cooperation in what, exactly?" Claire pushed food around her plate. "You haven't actually told me what you want me to do." "I want you to manage my finances," Vincent said simply. "The legitimate ones. I have significant real estate holdings, investment portfolios, business interests that exist entirely above board. But they're currently being managed by people who lack your particular skill set, your ability to see patterns, your attention to detail. And the illegitimate ones, the shell corporations, the money laundering?" Vincent smiled. It transformed his face, made him look almost human. "That's not your concern. You're smart enough to know that ignorance is valuable, Ms. Hayes. What you don't know, you can't be forced to tell. And if I refuse—" "You won't," he said with absolute certainty. "Because you're too intelligent to throw away your life for a principle. Because you understand that your cooperation comes with protection, for you and for everyone you care about. And because, deep down, you're curious about me." The last part was the most dangerous, because it was true. Over the next week, Vincent began his education, not of his business, of himself. He showed her his legitimate holdings, the real estate company that employed 300 people, the tech startup he'd funded that was genuinely innovative, the charitable foundation that bore his mother's name. He showed her the architecture of his legitimate empire, brick by brick, each piece a revelation. He also showed her pieces of himself. They took walks through Central Park, and he told her about his childhood in Rome, about a father who'd made money through means he didn't elaborate on, about a mother who'd loved Shakespeare and taught him to read in 4 languages by age 10, about the moment he'd decided he would be different from his father, and the moment he'd realized he was exactly like him. "People don't change," he said one evening as they watched the sun set from Bethesda Terrace. "They just become more honestly themselves. I tried being legitimate. I tried being legitimate for years. But I'm not built for legitimacy, Claire. I'm built for control, for power, for keeping what's mine." "And I'm yours?" she asked quietly. "You are," he confirmed. His eyes met hers, dark and unreadable. "For now." "For as long as you work for me." She should have asked what happened when she stopped. She didn't. By the second week, Claire had moved into an office in one of Vincent's buildings. Downtown, 43rd floor, a corner suite with views of the harbor. Her salary was more money than she'd make in 5 years at Ashford and Associates. She had access to accounts that probably violated 17 different financial regulations. She had a team, 3 accountants, a lawyer, and a security specialist named Marcus, who was built like a concrete wall and had kind eyes. "He always does this," Marcus told her on her 3rd day, appearing beside her desk with coffee. "Does what?" Claire asked. "Collects people. Brilliant people. People who are scared at first but then realize they're safer here than anywhere else." Marcus smiled sadly. "You'll get used to it. We all do." But Claire wasn't sure she wanted to get used to it. Everything changed on day 16. She was alone in her apartment, the beautiful, sterile apartment that wasn't hers, when there was a knock at the door. Through the peephole, she saw 3 men she didn't recognize. They wore dark suits and darker expressions. Before she could move, the door burst open. Vincent appeared, and he was different. This wasn't the man who quoted Shakespeare and told her about his childhood. This was something else entirely. Something dangerous in the way a hurricane was dangerous, beautiful and inevitable, and utterly merciless. The men on her doorstep didn't stand a chance. It was over in seconds. The violence was so efficient, so practiced, that Claire almost didn't register what had happened. One moment, there were 3 men, and the next moment, they were on the ground, and Vincent was closing her door with the calm of someone closing a car door. "Who were they?" Claire whispered. "The Castellano family," Vincent said, checking his knuckles. There wasn't a mark on them. "They wanted to know if you were leverage. They wanted to know if they could use you against me." He looked at her, and his expression softened slightly. "They can't," he said quietly. "Because you're not leverage, Claire. You're mine to protect, and I protect what's mine." He reached out, and this time actually touched her, his fingers brushing her cheek with surprising gentleness. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow, we meet with your family." Claire's blood turned to ice. "My family?" "Your mother and father. Your sister." Vincent moved toward the door. "I think it's time they understood the situation. Time they understood what happens to people who cooperate with me versus people who don't." "Vincent, no." "Good night, Claire." The door closed, leaving her alone in her beautiful prison, with the taste of fear sharp on her tongue and the terrible knowledge that everything had just escalated beyond her ability to control it. The restaurant was in Brooklyn, in a neighborhood Claire had never explored. Brick buildings, narrow streets, the kind of place that felt removed from Manhattan's gleaming towers. Vincent had chosen it deliberately, somewhere private, somewhere his presence wouldn't draw attention. Her parents were already seated when they arrived. Claire's mother looked pale, her usual composure fractured at the edges. Her father's jaw was clenched so tight she worried it might break. Her sister Emma sat between them, her hand gripping their mother's arm like an anchor. "Mr. Russo," her father said, standing stiffly as Vincent pulled out Claire's chair. "My daughter tells us you've offered her a job." "Your daughter is exceptional," Vincent replied smoothly, sitting beside Claire. His proximity was deliberate, a physical declaration. "I'm fortunate to have her working for me." The lie was so smooth, so convincing, that Claire almost believed it herself. In Vincent's telling, she'd simply taken a new position. Better pay, better benefits, better prospects. Nothing about surveillance or photographs or families being monitored like experiments under glass. "She seems frightened," Emma said quietly. She was studying Claire's face with the particular intensity of a younger sister who'd learned to read silences. "Why would a good job make her frightened?" Vincent turned to Emma, and something dangerous flickered across his expression before he smiled. "People are often frightened of change, Miss Hayes, of stepping into new territories. It's natural." "That's not fear," Emma said. "That's something else." Claire wanted to warn her sister to stop, to be careful. But Vincent simply laughed, a genuine sound that somehow made everything worse. "Intelligent family," he observed. "Claire gets her observational skills somewhere." The dinner progressed like a carefully choreographed dance. Vincent was charming in the way apex predators were charming. Beautiful, attentive, entirely focused on the moment. He asked her father about his law practice. He complimented her mother's jewelry. He asked Emma about her graduate studies in criminal psychology. That last question seemed calculated. It's fascinating, Emma explained, clearly not noticing the trap. The way certain individuals rationalize their behavior, the psychology of control. The criminal mind is rarely about money or even power. It's about establishing dominance in a framework where they set all the rules. Vincent smiled. Sounds like you've been reading about me. The table went silent. I haven't, Emma said carefully, but you have the profile. Intelligent, controlled, probably experienced significant trauma in childhood that created a need to control your environment. Charismatic enough to gather loyal followers. The type who... Emma, Claire's mother said sharply. But Vincent was already reaching across the table, his hand covering Emma's. It wasn't threatening, not exactly. It was something more subtle, a reminder, a demonstration of how easily he could reach her, could touch her, could do anything he wanted. Your sister is very perceptive, he said softly. I appreciate that. I also appreciate intelligence, which is why I'm going to be honest with you, Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Hayes, Miss Emma. Claire is no longer in danger from me. She's under my protection now. Her safety, and yours, is guaranteed as long as she remains valuable to me. If she attempts to leave, if she attempts to contact authorities, if she attempts to betray my trust in any way. He paused, letting the implication hang. Well, then the situation becomes considerably less pleasant. You're threatening us, Claire's father said flatly. I'm being transparent, Vincent corrected. I find clarity prevents misunderstandings. Claire works for me now. She lives in my world now, and my world has rules. When dinner ended, Vincent walked them to the car. He held Claire's hand the entire time, a gesture that was both affectionate and possessive. As her family climbed into the town car, Emma caught her eye one last time. In that glance, Emma communicated everything. I see what's happening. I know what he is, and I'm going to help you. Claire wanted to scream at her sister to forget that impulse, to forget everything and save herself. Instead, she watched them drive away. Back at the apartment, everything shifted. Vincent didn't speak as they entered. He simply walked to the window and stood there, silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline, his shoulders carrying the weight of whatever he was feeling. Your sister is going to try to help you, he said eventually. She's going to try to find evidence against me. She's going to reach out to her contacts in law enforcement. She's going to convince herself that she can rescue you. How do you... Because I know people, he interrupted. I've spent my entire life understanding how people think, what they do when they love someone, how far they'll go to protect family. He turned to face her. Your sister will fail. The evidence will disappear. Her contacts will suddenly transfer or retire. And eventually, she'll understand that interference has consequences. If you hurt her... I won't, Vincent said, and it was somehow worse than any threat. I'll hurt you instead, through you, by demonstrating that your resistance creates suffering for the people you love. Claire felt something break inside her chest. This was the true nature of his control. Not force, but leverage. Not violence, but the threat of violence extended through emotional bonds. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because I need you to understand something. Vincent moved closer, and she forced herself not to back away. I need you to understand that your choice to resist ended the moment you walked into that hotel suite. I need you to understand that your family's safety depends on your compliance. And I need you to understand. He reached out and tilted her chin up with one finger, forcing her to meet his eyes. That you're mine now. Not as an employee. Not as a consultant. As mine. Completely, irrevocably, and entirely. And when you finally accept that, when you stop fighting it and simply surrender to the reality of the situation, we might actually become something other than predator and prey. I'll never accept this, Claire whispered. You will, he said with absolute certainty, because the alternative is unthinkable, because watching your sister suffer will destroy you faster than any bullet ever could, because deep down, in that part of you that you haven't admitted to yourself yet, you're already accepting it. He kissed her then, and she didn't pull away. It was gentle and devastating and tasted like surrender wrapped in silk. When he drew back, his expression was softer, almost vulnerable. Tomorrow, someone from the Castellano family is going to approach you. They're going to offer you protection. They're going to suggest that you could testify against me, that the FBI would give you immunity. He traced her jawline with his thumb. They're going to promise you freedom. I want you to refuse them. I want you to come directly to me and tell me everything. And if I don't, then I'll kill them, and I'll make sure you watch. His voice remained conversational, almost gentle. I need you to understand that you're not fighting this situation, Claire. You're part of it now. You're complicit, and the only way through is forward, with me, understanding that we're bound together whether you like it or not. Claire's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Meet me tomorrow, 2 p.m. Central Park, South Gate, alone. She showed it to Vincent. He smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd predicted every move on the board before the game even began. They're predictable, he said, but you're not, which is why you're going to meet with them, and you're going to tell me everything they say, and you're going to prove to me that your loyalty lies with me alone. Outside, the moon rose over the city, a perfect silver crescent against the dark sky, and Claire understood, with crystalline certainty, that she had become a prisoner in a velvet cage, guarded by the very man who'd imprisoned her. Central Park was crowded with the kind of beautiful fall weather that made people forget about winter. Claire walked slowly from the south gate, her hands deep in her coat pockets, acutely aware of the men watching from various distances. Vincent's men, she assumed. Protection or surveillance. Probably both. The woman waiting by the Bethesda Terrace fountain was older, maybe mid-60s, with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. She wore an expensive coat and diamonds that caught the afternoon light like tiny stars. "You're the consultant," the woman said without preamble, Vincent's new acquisition. "I don't know who you are," Claire replied carefully. "Mariana Castellano. My family has been trying to understand why Vincent Russo suddenly has a woman living in one of his buildings, working in his office, being shown off to her family like a piece of art he's particularly proud of." Mariana smiled without warmth. "We have theories, leverage, insurance, a weakness." Claire said nothing. "You could help us," Mariana continued. "We know Vincent has been moving money through shell corporations. We know he's been acquiring properties that don't make financial sense unless you understand the money laundering operation beneath them. We know he's dangerous. What we need is someone on the inside who can provide documentation." "I can't do that," Claire said quietly. "You can, and you should." Mariana stepped closer. "Because Vincent Russo doesn't keep women in his life long. His last acquisition disappeared 3 years ago. We found her body in the Hudson River 6 months later. Before her, there was another. And another. He collects intelligent women, uses them, and then discards them when they stop being useful." Claire's chest tightened. "You're lying," she said, but it came out uncertain. "Am I?" Mariana produced a photograph from her coat. A woman, maybe 28, with dark hair and intelligent eyes. Sarah Chen. Worked for Vincent for 2 years. Then she tried to leave. They found her remains in pieces. Claire forced herself to look away, to breathe, to think. "If you work with us, we can protect you," Mariana said. "The FBI will put you in witness protection. A new identity, a new life, freedom. All we need is what you know. The account numbers, the shell corporations, the names of people who work for him." "No," Claire said. "Think carefully." "I said no." Claire turned to leave, but Mariana grabbed her wrist. "You're making a mistake." "Girl?" "Maybe," Claire said, pulling free. "But it's my mistake to make." She reported everything to Vincent that night. He listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable as she detailed the conversation word for word. When she finished, he simply nodded. "Good," he said. "Is it true?" Claire asked, unable to stop herself. "The woman in the Hudson? The others? Do you want to know the truth, or do you want to believe a comfortable lie? Vincent moved to the window, his silhouette dark against the city lights. Yes, I've had relationships that ended poorly. Yes, people who worked for me have disappeared. No, I didn't kill them. But I also didn't stop others from doing so. I allowed consequences to take their course. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're going to get. He turned to face her. The question isn't whether I'm capable of killing. You already know I am. The question is whether I would kill you. And the answer to that is no, Claire. You're too valuable, you're too brilliant, and you're too important to me now. How can I trust that? She asked, and her voice broke on the last word. Vincent crossed the apartment in 3 strides and cupped her face in his hands. It was a tender gesture, made terrifying by the context. You can't, he said simply. Trust is impossible here. What you can do is accept that your best chance of survival is cooperating with me. Because if you try to run, if you try to betray me, if you try to help my enemies, then yes, there will be consequences. But if you stay, if you work for me, if you accept what this is... He tilted her head back slightly, forcing her to meet his eyes. Then you'll be protected in ways you can't imagine. I don't want to be protected like this, Claire whispered. I know, he said, and kissed her again. This time it wasn't gentle. It was desperate and claiming and full of a hunger that spoke to something dark in her that she didn't want to acknowledge. When he drew back, she was shaking. There's something else, Vincent said, something I haven't told you. He led her to his study and opened a wall safe hidden behind an abstract painting. Inside were files, dozens of them. He pulled out one labeled with her name. Open it, he instructed. Claire's hands trembled as she did. Inside were photographs, new ones, her at Ashford and Associates 3 weeks ago, but also old ones, her walking to work 6 months before she'd ever heard of Vincent Russo, her having coffee with her colleagues, her visiting her mother's hospital room when she had knee surgery. I've been watching you for almost a year, Vincent said quietly, before you ever looked at the Russo account, before you ever sent that report. I selected you, Claire. I studied you. I learned everything about you, your habits, your routines, your weaknesses, your family's vulnerabilities, and then I maneuvered the situation so that you would find exactly what I wanted you to find. Claire's world tilted. Why? She demanded. Because I needed someone specific, someone brilliant enough to handle my finances, but inexperienced enough to be manipulated. Someone with family ties that would make them compliant. Someone who would eventually understand that their survival depended on acceptance. He closed the file. I created this situation from the beginning. Every choice you thought you were making, I'd already anticipated. Every attempt at resistance I've already planned for. Then why tell me this? Claire asked, her voice hollow. Because I'm tired of lies, Vincent said, and something vulnerable flickered across his face. Because despite everything, despite the manipulation, despite the control, despite the surveillance, I think you might actually care about me. And that terrifies me. It terrifies me because it means I'm vulnerable in ways I haven't been in years. It means you have power over me that has nothing to do with leverage. He reached out and pressed his palm against her chest, over her heart. You're not my prisoner, Claire. Not really. You could walk out that door right now, and I wouldn't stop you. I'd find you, yes. I'd bring you back, yes. But not because I could. Because you'd let me. Because part of you has already surrendered, even if your mind hasn't. Claire wanted to deny it. She wanted to scream that he was wrong. Instead, she felt tears sliding down her cheeks because she understood, with terrifying clarity, that he wasn't wrong. What am I supposed to do? She asked. You're supposed to choose, Vincent said. You can go to the FBI tomorrow. You can tell them everything. You can cooperate with the Castellanos. Or you can stay here, knowing exactly what I am, knowing exactly how you came to be here, and choose me anyway. That's not a choice, Claire whispered. No, he agreed, but it's the only one I'm offering. He left her alone in his study, with the files still open, with the photographs scattered across his desk. With the terrible knowledge that she had been playing a game whose rules had been written long before she ever entered the board, Claire stayed. Not because of Vincent's ultimatum. Not because she was afraid of the consequences. She stayed because on the morning after he revealed the truth, she woke up beside him and realized that fear had transmuted into something far more dangerous: choice. 3 weeks passed in a strange kind of equilibrium. She worked during the day, managing Vincent's legitimate empire with the competence that had always come naturally to her. She came home to him at night. She let him touch her. She touched him in return. And she tried not to think about the women whose bodies had been found in rivers. Emma called twice. Claire didn't answer. Her mother sent emails. Claire deleted them. It was easier to exist in the bubble Vincent had created than to face the world outside it. Easier to pretend that this was normal. That living with a man who'd orchestrated your entire existence was something people did. That love and captivity could somehow coexist in the same space. The fracture came on a Tuesday evening. Claire was leaving the office building when the black van pulled up beside her. She had maybe 2 seconds to register that something was wrong before hands grabbed her, dragging her inside. The doors slammed. The van accelerated. There were 4 men, armed, professional. One of them held a gun to her temple while another secured her wrists with plastic ties. "Vincent Russo sends his regards," one of them said in accented English. Russian, maybe, or Eastern European. "He wanted you to know that the game is over." Claire's mind spun through possibilities. Had Vincent changed his mind? Was this it? Was this how it ended? Had he decided she was too much trouble after all? But then her phone rang. Vincent's ringtone, loud and impossible to ignore in the cramped space of the van. "Answer it," the man with the gun instructed. Claire's hands were tied. One of the men held the phone to her ear. "Are you hurt?" Vincent's voice came through the speaker, and she'd never heard him sound like this. Raw, desperate, barely controlled. "Not yet," Claire said. "Dmitry Volkov," Vincent continued, speaking to the men now. "You've made a very serious mistake. You've taken something that belongs to me, and now you're going to experience exactly what happens to people who make that mistake." "We're going to trade her," Dmitry said, "for the account numbers, the offshore holdings, the real estate deeds, everything, or she dies." "She's not leverage," Vincent said quietly. "She's a line I don't cross. You're about to find out what happens when you cross it." The line went dead. The van stopped 15 minutes later in an abandoned warehouse in Red Hook. The men dragged Claire out, forcing her to her knees on the concrete floor. Dmitry stood before her, a tall man with scarred features and cold eyes. "Your boyfriend thinks he's invincible," Dmitry said. "Let me show you how wrong he is." He raised his hand to hit her, and Claire braced for impact. It never came. Vincent appeared from the shadows, like a ghost materializing from smoke. He moved with such speed and precision that Dmitry was on the ground before Claire even processed what had happened. Blood poured from the man's face where Vincent had driven his forehead into his nose. What followed wasn't a fight. It was an execution dressed as combat. Vincent moved through Dmitry's men like a force of nature. There was no wasted movement, no hesitation, no mercy. Claire watched in horror and fascination as the man she'd been sleeping with revealed the true nature of what he was. Not a businessman, not a criminal, a predator, a weapon. One of the men tried to run. Vincent let him make it almost to the door before moving with terrible grace and breaking his neck with movements so efficient it looked choreographed. When it was over, 4 men lay on the concrete floor. 2 were dead. The other 2 were dying slowly, and Vincent was leaving them to do it. He turned to Claire, and his eyes were black with violence. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentle in complete contradiction to what he'd just done. Claire couldn't speak, couldn't move. He crossed the distance between them and cut her wrists free with a knife he produced from his jacket. The plastic ties fell away. "Look at me," he commanded. She did. "This is what I am," Vincent said, his hands cradling her face with surprising tenderness. "This is what I'll do to anyone who touches you. This is the price of trying to use you against me. Do you understand?" "Yes," Claire whispered. "I need you to understand something else." He tilted her head up, forcing her to meet his gaze. "I need you to understand that I would burn the entire world down to keep you safe. I would commit atrocities. I would violate every moral code I've ever had. Because you've become—" He paused, and something raw flickered across his features. "You've become the only thing I can't afford to lose." "Vincent?" "No," he interrupted. "You need to listen. I'm going to give you one more choice. A real one. A final one. You can leave right now. I'll arrange transportation, documents, money. You'll never see me again. But you have to choose now, in this moment, knowing exactly what I am. Not the version of me that exists in your apartment. Not the version that quotes Shakespeare and tells you about his childhood. This version. The one who just executed 4 men without hesitation." Claire looked at his hands. They were covered in blood. His suit jacket was torn. There was a cut above his left eye that was bleeding slowly down his temple. And she realized with absolute certainty that she wasn't afraid. She was angry. She was heartbroken. She was violated by the manipulation and the surveillance and the endless layers of control. But she wasn't afraid. Because beneath all of it, beneath the violence and the obsession and the terrible certainty that this was wrong, she recognized something in Vincent that reflected something in herself. A hunger for control, a need to possess, a willingness to do terrible things for the people you loved. "I'm staying," she said. Vincent closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, he looked like a man who'd just been given absolution he didn't deserve. He pulled her against his chest, his bloody hands careful not to touch her clothes, his heartbeat racing against her ear. "You're mine," he said into her hair. "Completely, irrevocably, forever. And I will never let anything happen to you. I will burn the world down. I will commit every sin. I will become something far worse than what you just saw. Do you understand?" "Yes," Claire said, and she meant it. Outside the warehouse, the sound of police sirens began to wail in the distance. But Vincent didn't move. He just held her, and for the first time since they met, Claire understood that they were bound together not by manipulation or force, but by the terrible understanding that they were the same person wearing different faces. The warehouse was contained before the police arrived. Vincent's people, Marcus and 2 others Claire had never properly met, appeared within minutes, sweeping the scene with the efficiency of professionals. The bodies disappeared. The blood was cleaned. By the time the first responder arrived, there was nothing left but an empty warehouse and questions that would never be answered. Vincent held Claire's hand the entire time, his thumb stroking her wrist in a gesture that was almost absurdly tender, given the circumstances. The police questioned them briefly. Vincent had a story prepared, seamless and believable. A business meeting gone wrong. Criminals attempting to extort him. Self-defense. The responding officers seemed to accept it. Or perhaps they simply understood that investigating Vincent Russo too closely was a career-ending decision. They were released within the hour. The apartment felt different that night. Claire stood at the window while Vincent showered, washing away the blood and violence of the evening. The city stretched out below her, millions of lights, millions of lives, all proceeding with their comfortable assumption of safety and order. She wondered how many of those lives existed in their own velvet prisons, how many people had made the same choice she had, trading freedom for certainty. When Vincent emerged, he was wearing fresh clothes, but his left eye was swollen, and there was a bandage on his ribs. "You're hurt," Claire said. "It's nothing," he replied, but he didn't protest when she helped him remove his shirt to inspect the damage. The wound was bad, deep, and probably needed stitches he wasn't going to get. She cleaned it carefully, and he watched her face as she worked. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what?" Claire asked without looking up. "For everything. For the surveillance. For the manipulation. For turning you into this." He gestured vaguely, encompassing the moment, the apartment, the impossible situation they inhabited together. Claire finally met his eyes. "You didn't turn me into anything. I was always going to end up here or somewhere like it, some variation of this. You just gave me a face to attach to the inevitability." "That's not comforting," Vincent said. "No," Claire agreed, "but it's true." She finished bandaging his wound and moved away, but Vincent caught her wrist gently, pulling her back. He guided her to sit beside him on the bed. "The Castellanos are going to retaliate," he said. "Dimitri's death won't go unanswered. There's going to be a war, Claire, and you're going to be in the middle of it." "I know," she said. "You could still leave. I meant it in that warehouse. I'll help you disappear." "No, you won't," Claire said with absolute certainty, "and we both know it." Vincent smiled sadly. "No, I won't. Because if you left, I'd follow. And I'd burn everything to bring you back. So you might as well stay. It's more efficient that way." "Is that supposed to be romantic?" Claire asked. "Nothing about this is romantic," Vincent said, "but it's honest. And I think we've earned honesty." He pulled her close, and she let him. His chest was warm against her back, his arms wrapped around her like he was afraid she might disappear. Outside, the city hummed with its endless noise and motion. The war came quickly. The Castellanos made their first move within a week, a bomb at one of Vincent's nightclubs. 3 deaths, 47 injuries. It was meant to be a message. It became an invitation. Vincent responded by dismantling the Castellano operation piece by piece. He seized their assets, turned their people, destroyed their supply chains. It was warfare conducted with financial precision and surgical violence. By the end of the 3rd week, the Castellanos had ceased to exist as a functional organization. Claire watched it unfold from her office downtown, running numbers that documented the dissolution of an empire. She should have felt something, guilt perhaps, or moral revulsion. Instead, she felt the cold satisfaction of seeing a problem solved with elegant efficiency. Mariana Castellano was found in her penthouse with her wrists slit. The police ruled it a suicide. Everyone understood it was a mercy killing. Emma showed up at Claire's office on a Thursday afternoon. "We need to talk," her sister said, closing the door behind her with finality. Claire's heart stopped. Emma worked in criminal psychology now, and she'd clearly been gathering evidence. Her laptop sat on the desk between them like an accusation. "I know what he is," Emma said without preamble. "I know what you've become, and I've been contacted by the FBI multiple times asking if I can help them build a case against Vincent Russo." "What did you tell them?" Claire asked carefully. "Nothing," Emma said, "because I realized something. You don't need to be rescued. You don't want to be rescued. And more importantly," she paused, studying her sister's face, "you love him. Actually, genuinely, completely love him. And that terrifies me more than anything he could do." "Emma!" "Let me finish," her sister interrupted. "I spent weeks trying to figure out how to save you, talking to prosecutors, gathering evidence, planning your extraction, and then I realized the person I was trying to save wasn't who I thought you were anymore. You made a choice, a terrible, morally ambiguous, possibly insane choice. But it was yours." Emma closed her laptop and stood to leave. "I came here to tell you that I'm letting it go," she said. "All of it, the investigation, the evidence, the FBI contacts. Because you're my sister, and I love you enough to respect your autonomy, even when your autonomy has led you to something I don't understand." She paused at the door. "But if he ever hurts you, if he ever makes you regret this, I'm going to burn him down. I'm going to use everything I know about his psychology to destroy him, and he should know that." "He probably does," Claire said quietly. "Good," Emma said. "Then we understand each other." That night, Claire told Vincent that her family was no longer a threat. He listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he simply nodded. "Your sister is formidable," he said. "I respect that. I also respect that she walked away, even though she's a person who doesn't walk away from things." "She loves me," Claire said simply. "I know," Vincent replied. "It's why I didn't kill her." He said it with such matter-of-fact certainty that it took Claire a moment to process that he'd been seriously considering it as an option. "Would you have?" she asked. "If you'd asked me to," Vincent said. "If she'd become a genuine threat to you, to us. Yes. But she didn't, and you didn't ask. So instead, I let her make her choice." Claire realized that this was how he loved, not through grand gestures or romantic poetry, but through restraint, through allowing the people he cared about their autonomy, even when he had the power to remove it. It was a strange and terrible form of devotion, but it was devotion nonetheless. "I love you," she said suddenly. Vincent went very still. "I love you," she repeated, because she needed him to hear it twice. "Not because you've manipulated me into it, not because I've surrendered to the situation, but because underneath all of this, underneath the violence and the obsession and the terrible things we've both done, there's something real, something that would exist even if all of this was different." Vincent pulled her close, and she felt something break and reform in his chest. "I love you too," he said into her hair. "I've loved you since I first saw you 3 years ago, since before you knew I existed, and I will love you for the rest of my life, and probably long after that." Outside, the moon hung in the sky like a silver guardian, casting its pale light over the city of secrets and lies and impossible love. And Claire understood, finally, that some people were meant to find each other in darkness. Some people were meant to love violently, obsessively, completely. Some people were meant to become each other's salvation and damnation, wrapped into one. The penthouse overlooked Lake Como instead of Manhattan. The architecture was Italian Renaissance, all marble and frescoed ceilings and windows that framed the mountains like paintings. It was the kind of place that belonged to someone who'd transcended the need to hide. Vincent stood on the terrace with his father's old leather-bound journal in his hands, the one he'd finally allowed himself to read after a decade of refusing to acknowledge it existed. His father's handwriting covered page after page, confessions of violence, regrets that came too late, and in the margins, cryptic notes about a woman named Rosa who'd loved him despite everything. Claire found him there as the sun was setting, painting the lake in shades of gold and crimson. "Your mother called again," she said, setting a glass of wine beside him. "She wants to know when we're coming to Rome." "Next month," Vincent said, closing the journal. "I promised." Claire leaned against the railing beside him, her left hand catching the light. The diamond there was modest. Nothing about their life together was ostentatious, despite the wealth. They'd learned that lesson in New York. Subtlety was safety. "Marcus sent the quarterly reports," Claire continued. "The legitimate operations are up 23%. The foundation donated another $1 million to education initiatives." "And the other operations?" Vincent asked, though he already knew the answer. Claire wouldn't have mentioned the legitimate business first if the news was bad. "Stable," Claire said. "Dimitri's old territory is secure. The Russians aren't challenging us anymore. The FBI stopped investigating you 6 months ago. We're quiet right now." "Quiet is good," Vincent said. He turned to face her, taking in the way the sunset painted her skin golden. She'd changed in the 2 years they'd been together. Her edges had softened slightly, but her eyes had hardened. She'd become a woman who understood power and wielded it with the same careful precision Vincent did. "I was thinking," Claire said casually, "about moving some of the offshore accounts. The ones in the Cayman Islands are generating too much attention. If we reroute them through—" "Later," Vincent interrupted gently. He set the journal down and pulled her against him. "Right now, I just want to be here with you." Claire smiled, and it was the real smile, not the polite one she gave to people she didn't trust, but the one that was reserved for him, unguarded, genuine. "Who are you, and what have you done with Vincent Russo?" she teased. "The Vincent I know doesn't do sentiment." "The Vincent you know is learning," he said. He kissed her forehead, then her cheek, then finally her mouth. "I'm learning because of you." Their wedding had been small, conducted in a church in Vatican City by a bishop Vincent had made a donation to. Just family. Emma had been there, and she'd cried when Claire walked down the aisle. Vincent's mother had worn white and smiled with the complicated joy of a woman who'd raised a criminal but seen something human emerge from him anyway. The honeymoon had been unconventional. 3 weeks in Vienna, where Vincent conducted business during the day and Claire explored the city in the evenings. 2 weeks in Istanbul, where they'd stayed in a hotel overlooking the Bosphorus and talked about nothing important. A week in Paris, where they'd walked through the Louvre and argued about the meaning of art. It had been, Claire reflected now, remarkably normal, except for the security detail that followed them everywhere and the encrypted phone calls that interrupted meals, and the late-night conversations about people who'd disappeared or been neutralized or simply ceased to matter. But mostly, it had been normal. The villa hosted its first real party in June. 50 people, all of them carefully vetted, all of them knowing exactly what Vincent was and respecting him for it anyway. Legitimate business people mixed with less legitimate ones, politicians whose campaigns Vincent had funded, artists whose galleries he'd sponsored. It was a particular kind of elite, people who understood that morality was flexible and loyalty was paramount. Emma attended and spent most of the evening in intense conversation with a woman who turned out to be a criminal defense attorney. Claire watched her sister laugh genuinely for the first time in months and felt something settle in her chest. Her parents had declined the invitation, but they sent a gift, a Waterford crystal vase with a note in her mother's precise handwriting, for flowers, for beauty, for remembering that there's still good in the world. Claire had placed fresh flowers in it immediately and set it where Vincent would see it first every morning. On their second anniversary, Vincent brought Claire a gift. It was a file. Thick, heavy, official-looking. "What is it?" she asked, turning it over in her hands. "Your father's financial records," Vincent said, "from 1995 to 2003, the years he was misappropriating client funds." Claire went very still. "How did you—" "I had my people look into it after we met," Vincent continued. "I needed to understand your family, to know what leverage existed. And I found this. Your father stole approximately $2 million from his clients. The statute of limitations expired 3 years ago, so he can't be prosecuted. But the information could destroy his career, his reputation, everything he's built." "Why are you telling me this?" Claire asked quietly. "Because I thought you should know," Vincent said simply. "And because I want you to understand something. I could have used this against you. I could have threatened to release it to the state bar if you didn't cooperate. It would have been an effective lever, but I didn't. I chose you. I chose us. And I'm telling you this because I need you to know that I've never stopped choosing you, even when I could have chosen power or leverage or advantage instead." Claire opened the file with trembling hands. The evidence was complete, comprehensive, impossible to deny. She thought about her father, about the careful life he'd built, about the fragile lies he'd constructed. Then she closed the file and handed it back to Vincent. "Burn it," she said. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Claire said, "because you're right. I know you chose me, and I'm choosing you by letting this go. We're not going to be people who use the past to control each other. We're going to be better than that." Vincent took the file and walked to the fireplace. He watched it burn, and Claire watched him watch it burn. In that moment, she understood something fundamental about love. It wasn't about grand gestures or romantic declarations. It was about choosing, over and over again, to not use the weapons you had. It was about restraint, about sacrifice. It was about deciding that someone else's happiness was more important than your own power. That night, Claire woke to Vincent standing on the terrace, his silhouette dark against the moonlight. She joined him without speaking, and he wrapped an arm around her, pulling her against his warmth. "I've been thinking about stopping," he said quietly. "Stopping what?" Claire asked, though she knew. "All of it. The operations, the business, the violence, retiring. Actually retiring, not just pretending to while secretly running an empire." "Because?" Claire prompted. "Because I want to be a different person for you," Vincent said. Not because I'm transformed by love or redeemed by it. I'm not redeemed. I'll never be redeemed. But because I want you to be able to walk away from this if you ever choose to. I want you to have the option of a normal life." "I don't want a normal life," Claire said. "I never did. Normal people bore me. They always have." Vincent smiled against her hair. "I know. But I also know that wanting something and being forced into it are different things. I want to give you the choice." "Then here's my choice," Claire said, turning to face him. "I choose you, the real you. Not the reformed version, or the legitimate version, or the version that pretends to be something he's not. I choose the man who orchestrated my entire existence, and then decided to let me have autonomy anyway. I choose the criminal. I choose the predator. I choose the one who loves like he's burning the world down." Vincent kissed her then, and it was the kiss of a man who'd been given exactly what he didn't deserve and had decided to accept it anyway. Above them, the moon hung in the Italian sky like a blessing they'd never asked for, but somehow received. Below them, the lake reflected silver light, and in that moment, suspended between sky and water, between the legitimate and illegitimate, between love and obsession, Claire and Vincent existed in the perfect balance of two dark souls who'd found their match. The vault of her heart, which had been locked tight against everyone and everything, stood open, and Vincent Russo, the silent kingpin, stood inside it. Forever.